The blood on her fingertips was still warm when Helena Ortega realized she had found more than just a trail. She knelt in the dust, 3 miles outside Presidio, Texas, studying the way the afternoon sun caught the droplets scattered across the pale desert sand, reading the story they told as clearly as words on a page. Someone was hurt, bleeding from the left side, favoring their right leg as they staggered north toward the Rio Grande. It was April of 1878, and the spring heat already shimmered off the rocky ground in waves that made distant mountains dance. Helena wiped her fingers on her worn leather trousers and stood, her dark braids swinging between her shoulder blades as she scanned the horizon. At 23, she had spent more than half her life learning to read the desert the way her Apache grandmother had taught her, before fever took the old woman 6 years back. Her father, a Mexican trader, had given her his sharp mind for details and his stubborn refusal to be anything less than the best at what she did. What she did was track better than any man in West Texas, and everyone from El Paso to San Antonio knew it. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, one hand dropping instinctively to the knife at her belt. A lone rider approached from the direction of Presidio, his silhouette tall and broad-shouldered against the brilliant blue sky. As he drew closer, Helena could make out a weather-beaten face beneath a dusty black hat, angular features set in an expression of grim determination. He sat his buckskin gelding like a man born in the saddle, moving with the horse rather than against it. He reined in 10 feet away, his pale green eyes taking in her stance, her clothing, the tracks she had been studying. Those eyes lingered on her face for a moment, something flickering in their depths before his expression shuddered again. "You Helena Ortega." His voice was rough, like whiskey over gravel. Depends on who is asking and why. "Name is Samuel Iverson. I need a tracker." He dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his horse forward. "Best one I can get. Man in town said that would be you." Helena crossed her arms, studying him with the same careful attention she gave to broken branches and disturbed earth. He was somewhere near 30, she guessed, with calloused hands and the kind of lean, rangy build that came from hard work rather than soft living. His clothes were trail-worn but well-maintained, his gun worn low on his hip with the ease of long familiarity. But it was the desperation carefully masked behind his stoic expression that caught her attention. "I am busy," she said, gesturing at the tracks. "Someone is hurt, heading for the river." "Then they will have to wait." Samuel's jaw tightened. "My brother was taken 4 days ago. Bandits hit our ranch up near Fort Davis, killed our foreman, burned the bunkhouse, and rode off with Jacob. I have been following their trail, but I lost it in the rocks near the Chinati Mountains. I need someone who can pick it up again. 4 days is a long time. Trail will be cold. I know that." Frustration leaked into his voice. "That is why I need you. I can pay. I have gold." Helena looked back at the blood drops soaking into the sand, then at Samuel Iverson's face. She had learned long ago that the desert did not care about human schedules or human grief. It kept its secrets or gave them up according to its own rules. Whoever had left this trail was likely already across the river into Mexico, beyond her reach or concern. "How much gold?" she asked. $50 now, another 50 when we find him." It was more money than she usually made in 3 months. Helena calculated quickly, thinking of the supplies she needed, the repairs to her small adobe house on the edge of Presidio, the medicine her younger sister Maria needed for the cough that had plagued her through the winter. 75 now, 25 when we find him, she countered. "And if your brother is dead, you still pay the 25. Samuel's eyes flashed, but he nodded curtly. "Deal. How soon can you be ready?" "I am ready now." Helena whistled sharply, and her paint mare trotted over from where she had been grazing in the sparse shade of a mesquite tree. "But we stop in town first. I need to let my sister know I will be gone, and you need to buy supplies. We will be on the trail at least a week, maybe more." They rode into Presidio side by side, their horses' hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that hung golden in the slanting afternoon light. The town was a collection of sun-bleached buildings clustered along the Rio Grande, where the river bent south toward Mexico. Most of the inhabitants were Mexican, with a scattering of Anglo settlers and soldiers from the nearby fort. Helena knew almost everyone by name, had tracked lost cattle or children or wandering husbands for half of them at one time or another. She left Samuel at the general store with a list of supplies they would need and rode to the small house she shared with Maria at the eastern edge of town. Her sister was in the garden behind the house, tending the struggling vegetables they coaxed from the reluctant soil. "Helena," Maria looked up, pushing back the wide brim of her hat. At 18, she had their mother's delicate features and gentle disposition, so different from Helena's sharp edges and restless energy. "You are back early. Did you find what you were looking for?" "I found a trail. Someone else found me." Helena dismounted and tied her mare to the fence post. "I have to leave again, Maria. There is a man, his brother was taken by bandits. He is paying well." Maria's face fell. "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. I left money in the tin under the floorboard, enough for anything you need." Helena pulled the small bag of gold coins Samuel had given her from her pocket and added most of them to Maria's palm. "Buy that medicine from Dr. Wilson. Get flour, beans, whatever we need, and stay away from Luis Vega." "Helena, Luis is nice to me." "Luis Vega is nice to every woman with a pretty face and no father to protect her." Helena softened her tone, touching her sister's cheek. "I know you are lonely, little one, but you can do better than a gambler who drinks away his wages and has a wife in Chihuahua." He said she left him. "They always say that." Helena sighed, pulling her sister into a brief embrace. "I will be back as soon as I can. Lock the doors at night, and if you need help, go to Senora Garcia. She will look after you." By the time Helena returned to the general store, Samuel had purchased everything on her list and loaded it onto a sturdy pack mule. He looked up as she approached, something easing in his expression when he saw her. "Thought maybe you had changed your mind," he said. "I do not change my mind once I make a deal." Helena checked the supplies, nodding approval at his choices. "We leave now while there is still daylight. Tell me everything you remember about the attack, about the tracks you followed, about where you lost the trail." They rode north as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose. Samuel talked as they rode, his voice steady despite the emotion Helena could hear beneath the words. His younger brother Jacob was 24, a skilled horseman with dreams of buying his own ranch someday. Their parents had died in a cholera outbreak 5 years back, leaving Samuel to raise Jacob and run the small cattle operation their father had built. "We were not wealthy," Samuel said, his hands loose on the reins, "but we were doing well enough. Had a contract to supply beef to the fort, good grazing land, a dozen head of prime stock. Then these bastards rode in at dawn 4 days back." "How many?" Helena asked, her eyes constantly scanning the ground even though they were still on the main road north. 8, maybe 10. Faces covered with bandanas. They knew what they were doing, coordinated, came in from 2 directions at once. His jaw clenched. "I was in the barn. Heard the shots, came running, but by the time I got there, they had Jacob on a horse and were riding out. I went after them, but my horse pulled up lame after the first mile. You followed them on foot?" "Until I could catch another horse from the herd they scattered. Lost half a day that way." Frustration roughened his voice. Followed them east into the mountains, through some of the roughest country I have ever seen. Then the trail just disappeared in a stretch of bare rock near the peak. I spent 2 days searching every canyon, every draw, but I could not pick it up again. That is when I came to Presidio. Someone at the cantina told me about you. Helena nodded, filing away the information. 8 to 10 riders, organized, willing to kill. That suggested either bandits running a kidnapping operation or possibly something more personal. Your brother, did he have enemies? A woman someone else wanted, gambling debts, anything like that? Jacob. Samuel actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. He barely left the ranch except to go to church on Sundays, spent all his time with the horses. He was good with them, gentle. They trusted him. His voice dropped. Everyone trusted him. They camped that night in a shallow arroyo that offered some protection from the wind. Helena built a small fire while Samuel tended the horses and mule, working in a companionable silence that surprised them both. When the coffee was boiling and the beans were heating in the pan, they sat across from each other, the firelight casting shifting shadows across their faces. "How did you learn to track?" Samuel asked, accepting the tin cup she handed him. "My grandmother. She was Mescalero Apache, taken in a raid when she was young and sold to a Mexican family in Ojinaga. My grandfather bought her freedom and married her. She never forgot the old ways, though. She taught me to read sign, to understand what the land is saying if you know how to listen." "And your parents?" "My father was a trader. He died when I was 17, killed on the road from El Paso by robbers who did not know he had already sold his goods and carried nothing but a few pesos." Helena stared into the fire, her face expressionless. "My mother died giving birth to Maria. So it has been just the two of us for 6 years now." Samuel was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee. "It must be hard, a woman alone in this country. Harder for some than others." Helena met his eyes across the fire. "I can outshoot most men, outtrack any of them. The ones who matter respect that. The ones who do not, I avoid. And the ones who do not let you avoid them," she smiled, a fierce expression that had nothing soft in it. "I have a knife and know how to use it. I have only had to prove it twice. Word spreads fast in small towns." They reached the foothills of the Chinati Mountains by late afternoon the next day. The land here was different from the flat desert around Presidio. All vertical stone thrust up from the earth in fantastic formations, cut through with narrow canyons where shadows pooled thick and cool. Samuel led her to the place where he had lost the trail, a broad expanse of wind-scoured rock that showed no obvious tracks. Helena dismounted and walked the area on foot, her eyes moving in a pattern Samuel did not understand, seeing things he could not see. She moved like a dancer, fluid and purposeful, bending to examine a scratch on the stone here, a scatter of small pebbles there. An hour passed, then 2. The sun slid lower, turning the rocks red as rust. "Here," Helena called finally. She was 50 yards from where Samuel waited with the horses, crouched at the edge of the rock field where it met sparse grass. They split up. Most went east following the ridge, but 2 broke off, heading north into that canyon. They were carrying extra weight. Samuel was at her side in moments, staring at the faint impressions in the dirt she indicated. They looked like nothing to him, just disturbed earth that could have been made by anything. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." She stood, dusting off her hands. "The question is whether your brother is with the 2 who went north or the larger group that went east. If you had to guess." "I do not guess. But if they split up, it was for a reason. The larger group is probably a decoy, leading anyone who follows them away from the real destination. So we go north." They entered the canyon as the last light was fading from the sky. It was a narrow cleft between towering walls of stone, barely wide enough for two horses to walk abreast. The air was noticeably cooler here, carrying the faint scent of water. Helena kept her eyes on the ground, occasionally dismounting to examine something more closely. "They came through here within the last 3 days," she said as they made camp in a wider section of the canyon. "There is water ahead, maybe another mile. We will find their campsite there." "How do you know they camped?" Samuel asked, watching her move around the camp with efficient grace, her movements practiced and sure. "Because this canyon is a natural bottleneck. The only way through is forward, and it gets narrower before it opens up again. If you were transporting a prisoner and wanted to rest without being trapped, you would do it where there is water and room to defend yourself if necessary. About a mile ahead, this canyon opens into a basin with a spring. I have been there before." Samuel shook his head in wonder. "You see all that from disturbed dirt and broken twigs. I see what is there." Helena settled onto her bedroll, her back against a smooth boulder still warm from the day's heat. "You see it too. You just do not know you are seeing it. Your mind skips over the details because they seem unimportant. But everything means something if you look at it right." "Teach me," Samuel said suddenly. "Show me what you see." So she did. As the stars wheeled overhead and the fire burned down to embers, Helena pointed out the signs she had been following. The way certain stones were disturbed, turned over to show their darker undersides. The broken ends of branches where horses had passed, still showing green beneath the dried outer layer. The pattern of crushed grass that indicated which direction riders were moving, how fast, how recently. Samuel listened intently, asking questions, and Helena found herself enjoying the teaching in a way she had not expected. He was intelligent, quick to grasp concepts, and he looked at her with genuine respect in those pale green eyes. Not the wary respect men usually gave her, tinged with resentment or fear, something warmer, more personal. "You should sleep," she said finally, when the moon had climbed high enough to silver the canyon walls. "I will take first watch. Wake me in 4 hours. We split it even." Helena nodded, appreciating that he did not assume she needed protection or special treatment. They were partners in this hunt, equals despite the gold he had paid her. She watched him settle into his bedroll, his long body relaxing degree by degree until his breathing evened out into sleep. Even unconscious, there was a vigilance about him, a readiness that spoke of a man who had learned to sleep light and wake fast. Helena understood that. She had slept the same way since her father died, always listening, always ready. The canyon was quiet except for the soft sounds of the horses shifting and the distant cry of a nighthawk hunting. Helena let her mind drift, thinking about Samuel's brother, about the men who had taken him. Kidnapping for ransom was common enough in this borderland where law was scarce and distances vast. But something about this did not fit that pattern. If they wanted ransom, they would have sent a demand by now, contacted Samuel somehow. Instead, they had simply disappeared into the mountains with their prisoner, which meant either they wanted something else from Jacob Iverson, or the kidnapping itself was not the point. Either way, it did not bode well for the young man's chances. When 4 hours had passed, Helena woke Samuel with a gentle touch on his shoulder. He came awake instantly, hand moving toward his gun before he recognized her in the moonlight. "Your turn," she said. "Wake me if anything changes." She had expected to lie awake, listening to him move around the camp, but exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. When she woke to pale pre-dawn light, Samuel was crouched by the fire, coffee already boiling. "You let me sleep," she said, sitting up. It was not quite an accusation. "You needed it. We have hard riding ahead if we are going to catch up to them." He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing briefly. "Besides, I have gotten used to keeping watch. Did it every night after the attack, worried they might come back. They found the campsite exactly where Helena had predicted, a small basin where a spring bubbled up between rocks to form a clear pool before trickling away into the sand. The signs were everywhere once she pointed them out to Samuel. The ring of stones where a fire had been built, the flattened areas where bedrolls had lain, the pile of horse droppings off to one side. 3 days old, Helena said, crumbling the dung between her fingers. Maybe a bit less, and look here. She moved to one of the flattened areas. This one was restless, moved around more than the others. See how the grass is disturbed in a larger pattern, and here. She pointed to a spot near a boulder. Rope fibers caught on the rock. They had him tied. Is he hurt? Samuel's voice was tight with controlled emotion. Helena studied the ground carefully, walking in widening circles around the campsite. I do not see blood, but he tried to get away once. See these scuff marks? He ran that direction, only made it about 20 feet before they caught him. After that, they tied him to one of the horses at night. These tracks show a man standing very still for long periods, held in place. Samuel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Which way did they go from here? North again, staying in the canyons. But the trail is clearer now, more confident. They think no one is following them anymore. For 3 more days, they pushed hard through increasingly rough terrain, following the trail Helena read like words on a page. Samuel learned to spot some of the signs himself now, to notice the small disturbances that meant horses had passed. He also learned other things about Helena Ortega, details that accumulated like water wearing away stone. She was patient with him when he asked questions, but impatient with anything she considered foolish or wasteful. She could cook a decent meal with minimal supplies and make coffee strong enough to strip rust. She sang sometimes as they rode, old songs in Spanish that sounded like heartbreak and defiance mixed together. She moved through the desert like she was part of it, never fighting the land but flowing around its obstacles. And she was beautiful, though Samuel suspected she would dismiss the observation as irrelevant. There was a fierce elegance to her features, a strength in the line of her jaw and the directness of her dark eyes. When she smiled, which was not often, it transformed her entire face into something that made his chest tight. He was falling in love with her, Samuel realized on the evening of the 3rd day out from the campsite. They were crossing a stretch of open grassland, the mountains rising purple and gold in the distance, and Helena had just pointed out a family of javelinas rooting in the underbrush. The way she watched them, with a mixture of respect and affection, the way she explained their habits and signs to him, the way the wind caught strands of her dark hair that had escaped her braid and made them dance around her face. Everything about her called to something deep in his chest, something that had been locked down since his parents died and he had taken on the responsibility of keeping his brother safe, a responsibility he had failed. Samuel, Helena was watching him, concern in her eyes. Are you well? Just thinking about Jacob, he said, which was partly true. Hoping we are not too late. We will find him. She said it with such certainty that he almost believed her. The trail is getting fresher. We are maybe a day behind them now, possibly less. That night, they camped in a grove of cottonwoods beside a clear stream. The water was cold from mountain snowmelt, and Helena stripped off her boots to wade in up to her knees, her face tilted up to catch the last rays of the setting sun. Come in, she called to Samuel. It feels good. He joined her, the cold water a shock after the day's heat. They stood side by side, not touching, watching the light fade from the sky and the first stars emerge. Can I ask you something? Samuel said. You have been asking me things for days. Something personal. Helena glanced at him, wariness flickering across her face, but she nodded. Have you ever thought about doing anything else? Not tracking, I mean, having a different life. She was quiet for a long moment, her toes curling in the sandy stream bottom. I used to think I would marry, have children, the things women are supposed to want. But I am not like most women. The men in Presidio, they either want someone soft and obedient or they want to break me like a wild horse, make me submit to prove they can. I have no interest in either. Not all men are like that. No, she agreed, turning to look at him fully. Not all men, but the good ones are usually already taken or looking for someone different than me. What if they were not? The words came out before Samuel could stop them. What if there was a man who saw you exactly as you are and wanted nothing more than that? Helena's breath caught, her eyes searching his face in the twilight. Samuel, I know this is not the time, he said quickly. We are hunting for my brother, and you are doing a job I am paying you for. But when this is over, when we find Jacob and get him home safe, I want to see you again. Not as tracker and client, as something more. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and skilled and fierce. I know you love your sister enough to take dangerous jobs to pay for her medicine. I know you sing sad songs when you think I am not listening, and that you are gentle with horses even when you are hard on everything else. He took a step closer, the water swirling around their legs. I know that every day I spend with you makes me want the next day more. Helena was silent, conflict plain on her face. What if we find your brother dead? She asked finally. What if I fail? Then you fail. It will not change what I feel. She reached out, her hand touching his chest, just over his heart. Ask me again when this is done, she said softly. When we know how the story ends. They found the bandit camp the next afternoon. It was a rough collection of tents and lean toss in a box canyon, well hidden and easily defended. Helena and Samuel left the horses a quarter-mile back and crawled the last distance on their bellies, using the rocks and sparse brush for cover. From their vantage point on the canyon rim, they could see everything. 7 men lounged around a fire, drinking and playing cards. Their horses were picketed at one end of the camp, and at the other end, barely visible in the shadow of an overhang, was a lone figure tied to a wooden post. Jacob, Samuel breathed, relief and rage mixing in his voice. Even from this distance, they could see his brother was alive, though his head hung forward and he looked exhausted. We wait for dark, Helena whispered. Going in now would be suicide. Too many of them, too much open ground. It was the longest afternoon of Samuel's life. They lay in the rocks, taking turns watching the camp, as the sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. Helena sketched the camp layout in the dirt, marking the positions of the sentries, the horses, the weapons she could see. She explained her plan 3 times, making sure Samuel understood his role. We go in quiet, she said. No shooting unless there is no other choice. Sound travels far in these canyons, and if there are more men out hunting or scouting, we do not want to call them back. You free Jacob while I cover you. We get to the horses, cut the picket line, scatter their mounts. That will slow any pursuit. And if it goes wrong, then we fight. She checked her rifle, her revolver, the knife at her belt. But it will not go wrong. They moved down into the canyon 2 hours after full dark, when the bandits' fire had burned low and most of the men had rolled into their blankets. One sentry sat near the fire, fighting sleep. Another was supposed to be watching from the northern approach, but Helena had spotted him nodding off an hour earlier. They moved like shadows, making no sound on the rocky ground. Samuel's heart hammered so hard he was certain it would give them away, but Helena's calm confidence steadied him. They reached Jacob without raising an alarm, and Samuel nearly sobbed with relief when his brother's eyes opened and recognized him in the darkness. Samuel cut the ropes while Helena kept watch, her rifle ready. Jacob was weak, barely able to stand, but between them they got him moving toward where they had left the horses. They were halfway there when one of the bandits woke and stumbled toward the camp's edge to relieve himself. He saw them in the moonlight and opened his mouth to shout. Helena shot him from 30 feet, a perfect shot that dropped him without a sound beyond his body hitting the ground. But the damage was done. The camp erupted into chaos, men shouting and grabbing for weapons. "Run," Helena ordered, already moving. She fired twice more, aiming high to keep heads down rather than to kill. They reached the horses and got Jacob mounted as bullets began to whine past them in the darkness. Samuel returned fire while Helena cut the picket line of the bandits' horses and fired her pistol in the air, spooking them into scattering. Then they were riding hard through the darkness with shouts and gunfire behind them. Jacob clung to his saddle, barely conscious, while Samuel led his horse and Helena covered their retreat, stopping twice to fire back at the pursuit she could hear but barely see. They rode until the horses were lathered and blowing, until the sounds of pursuit had faded into the vast silence of the desert night. Only then did Helena call a halt in a narrow side canyon where they could defend themselves if necessary. Jacob was in bad shape. Dehydrated, exhausted, with rope burns on his wrists and ankles and bruises covering his ribs. But he was alive, and when Samuel gave him water and food, he managed a weak smile. "Knew you would come," he whispered. "Told them my brother would come." "Rest now," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will get you home." They pushed hard for the next 2 days, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Helena ranged ahead and behind, watching for pursuit, but the bandits either could not or would not follow. On the 3rd day, they reached Fort Davis, where the army doctor examined Jacob and pronounced him bruised and exhausted but fundamentally sound. "He needs rest, good food, and time," the doctor said. "Nothing a few weeks at home would not fix." They stayed at the fort that night, the first time any of them had slept in a bed in more than a week. In the morning, Samuel found Helena in the stable, checking on her paint mare. "The doctor says Jacob can travel in a few days," he said. "Slow, but he can make it back to the ranch." "That is good." Helena did not look at him, her attention on her horse's hooves. "You will want to get him home as soon as possible." "Helena." Samuel waited until she looked up at him. "Come with us. Stay at the ranch while Jacob recovers. Let me keep my promise to pay you the rest of what I owe, and let me try to convince you that what I said by the stream was real. Samuel, I cannot just leave Maria alone in Presidio. Then we will get Maria and bring her too. The ranch has plenty of room, and Jacob would benefit from her company while he heals. You both would be safer there than in town." Helena opened her mouth to refuse, then closed it again. Something in Samuel's eyes, an openness and hope she had not often seen directed at her, made her reconsider. "For a little while," she said finally, "until Jacob is better and we know there is no danger from the bandits, then we will see." Samuel's smile could have lit the entire fort. "That is all I ask, a chance." 2 weeks later, they all stood on the porch of the Iverson ranch as the sun set over the rolling grasslands. Jacob was already looking better, the color back in his face, his strength returning. He and Maria sat in rocking chairs, talking quietly while Maria worked on her embroidery and Jacob whittled a piece of wood into the shape of a horse. Helena stood beside Samuel at the porch rail, their shoulders nearly touching. "Your brother likes my sister," she observed. "My sister likes your brother," Samuel countered. "Should we be worried? Maria could do worse than a man who is gentle with horses and patient with her questions about every plant and animal on the ranch. Jacob could do worse than a woman who makes him laugh and does not fuss over him like he is made of glass." They were quiet for a moment, watching the sky turn from gold to rose to purple. Finally, Samuel said, "You have been here 2 weeks. I know how long I have been here. You have not mentioned leaving. I have not decided if I am staying." Samuel turned to face her fully. "What would help you decide?" Helena met his eyes, seeing in them everything she had been afraid to hope for. Respect and desire mixed together, partnership and passion, the promise of something real and lasting. "Ask me again," she said. "Ask me what you asked by the stream." He took both her hands in his calloused palms warm against hers. "Helena Ortega, when I look at you, I see the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met. I see the person I want beside me for every sunrise and every challenge, every joy and every sorrow. I see the only woman I want to build a life with. Will you stay? Not as a guest or a hired tracker, but as my partner, my love, my wife." "Yes," Helena said, the word coming easier than she had expected. "Yes, I will stay." When he kissed her, it tasted like promise and homecoming all at once, like finding water in the desert after days of thirst. Behind them, Maria gave a little cry of delight, and Jacob laughed, the first real laugh since his ordeal. They were married a month later in Presidio, with half the town crowding into the small church and spilling out into the street. Maria served as Helena's attendant, wearing a new dress they had sewn together, and Jacob stood as Samuel's best man, fully recovered and grinning throughout the entire ceremony. "I never thought I would see this day," Maria whispered to Helena as they waited for the ceremony to begin. "You, in a white dress, about to become a wife." "It is not a white dress," Helena pointed out. She had chosen a practical dress in deep blue, one she could wear again rather than saving in a trunk. "And I am not becoming just a wife. I am becoming a partner who loves him." Helena smiled, thinking of Samuel waiting for her at the altar, of the life they would build together. "Yes," she agreed, "a partner who loves him very much." The ranch became home in ways Helena had not expected. She still tracked, still took jobs when someone needed her skills, but now Samuel rode with her, learning more every day, becoming a skilled tracker in his own right. They worked the ranch together, building the herd, improving the grazing lands, earning the respect of their neighbors through hard work and fair dealing. Maria moved in permanently, though she and Jacob took their time courting properly. It was another year before Jacob worked up the courage to propose, presenting Maria with a ring he had bought with his own saved wages, and a speech he had practiced so many times he could have recited it in his sleep. "I know I am not fancy or educated," he told her, his hat literally in his hands. "I know I am just a rancher who will probably never see the ocean or any of those places you talk about. But I love you, Maria Ortega. I love the way you see beauty in everything, the way you make me want to be better than I am. If you will have me, I promise to spend every day trying to make you happy." Maria, tears streaming down her face, said yes before he even finished. They held the second wedding at the ranch, under a canopy of flowers Maria had spent weeks growing and training into place. The whole county seemed to turn out, bringing food and music and dancing that lasted until dawn. Helena watched her sister glowing in Jacob's arms and felt a contentment she had never known was possible. "Happy?" Samuel asked, pulling her close as they danced under the stars. "Very," Helena said. "Though I never imagined this would be my life." "What did you imagine?" "I do not know. Something harder, I think, more lonely. I thought I would always be the woman people hired but never quite accepted, always on the outside looking in." Samuel kissed her temple. "You gave me back my brother. You gave me yourself. You are the center of everything, Helena. Do you not see that? The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters when the cattle struggled, dry summers when the grass turned brown and brittle. There were dangers, too, rustlers and bandits and the occasional conflict with neighboring ranchers. But through it all, Helena and Samuel faced everything together, equals in partnership and in love. Their first child came 2 years after their wedding, a son they named Daniel, who had his mother's dark eyes and his father's determined jaw. He was followed 15 months later by a daughter, Grace, who inherited Helena's tracking instincts and her grandmother's Apache fierceness. Maria and Jacob had 3 children of their own, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of cousins playing and arguing and learning together. Helena taught them all to track, to read the land, to respect the desert that could be both harsh and generous. Samuel taught them to ride, to work cattle, to be fair in their dealings with others. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, Helena and Samuel would sit on the porch and remember. They remembered the trail that had brought them together, the desperate hunt through the mountains, the moment by the stream when everything had changed. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked once on their 10th anniversary. "Giving up the freedom of moving wherever you wanted, taking whatever jobs you chose." Helena took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I did not give up my freedom," she said. "I chose a different kind, the freedom to belong somewhere to someone. The freedom to build something lasting instead of always moving on. That is a choice too, Samuel, and I have never regretted it for a moment." As the years turned into decades, the ranch prospered. Daniel grew up to manage the cattle operation with his father, while Grace married a surveyor from El Paso and continued to track, teaching her own children the skills her mother had passed down. Maria and Jacob's children spread out across Texas, but they always came home for holidays, bringing grandchildren and stories, and the kind of joy that comes from a family deeply rooted in love. On their 40th anniversary, Samuel and Helena rode out into the desert together, just the 2 of them and their horses, following the same trails they had ridden 4 decades earlier, when a desperate man had hired the best tracker he could find. They were older now, their hair gray and their movements slower, but the connection between them was as strong as ever. They made camp where they had camped that first night, in the arroyo where Helena had first begun teaching Samuel to read sign. The desert had not changed much, still harsh and beautiful, still keeping its secrets close. "I would do it all again," Samuel said as they watched the stars emerge. "Every moment, every choice that led me to you, even the part where bandits kidnapped your brother. Well, maybe not that part." He smiled, pulling her close. "But everything that came after, yes. Absolutely yes." Helena rested her head on his shoulder, thinking of the trail of their life together, the signs they had left along the way. Children raised and loved, a home built from nothing, a partnership that had weathered every storm. She had spent her life reading the stories written in dust and stone, but the best story had been the one she had written with Samuel, word by patient word, day by precious day. "I love you," she said, the words as easy now as breathing. "I loved you from the moment you looked at me and saw not just a tracker but a person worth knowing. I loved you when you asked me to teach you, when you respected my knowledge instead of resenting it. I loved you when you asked me to stay, and I have loved you every day since." Samuel kissed her, his lips still knowing the shape of hers after 40 years of practice. "And I loved you from the moment I saw you reading those tracks like words on a page, seeing what no one else could see. I loved your strength and your spirit. I loved the woman who sang sad songs and made strong coffee and saved my brother's life. I love you still, Helena. I will love you until the last star falls from the sky." They sat together under those stars, 2 people who had found each other against all odds in a wild land that did not often forgive mistakes. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and creosote, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. Their grandchildren would tell stories about them for generations, about the grandmother who could track anything, and the grandfather who had hired her for a desperate hunt. They would tell about how love had grown between them on the trail, about the family they had built, about the ranch that still stood strong on the Texas grassland. But for now, in this moment, there were just two people watching the stars wheel overhead, their hands clasped together, their hearts beating in rhythm, their story written not in sand that would blow away but in the lives they had touched and the love they had shared. The trail had led them true, just as Samuel had hoped when he first hired Helena all those years ago. She had led him to his brother, and in the process, she had led them both to something neither had been seeking but both desperately needed: a home, a family, a love strong enough to weather any storm the desert could throw at them. Years later, when they were both gone and their children scattered their ashes together on the land they had loved, the desert would keep their story the way it kept all stories. In the shape of the ranch that still stood, in the children and grandchildren who carried their blood and their lessons, in the tracks they had left on the hearts of everyone who had known them. Helena Ortega had spent her life reading sign and tracking better than most scouts. Samuel Iverson had hired her to lead him true, and she had done exactly that. But the trail had led them both somewhere unexpected, somewhere better than either had dreamed possible. It had led them home to each other, and that was the best track either of them had ever followed. The ranch stood for another 100 years, a testament to their partnership and their love. Visitors could see the original house they had expanded over the years, the barn Samuel had built with his own hands, the garden where Maria had first grown flowers for her wedding. They could hear the stories about the woman who could read the desert like a book, and the cowboy who had been wise enough to see her worth. But more than the buildings or the stories, what endured was the lesson they had taught by living their lives with courage and conviction. That love could be found in unexpected places, between unexpected people. That partnership mattered more than convention. That respect was the foundation of true intimacy. That two strong people could build something stronger together than either could manage alone. Their descendants carried those lessons forward, generation after generation, and the desert remembered. The desert always remembers those who walk its trails with honesty and heart, those who read its signs not just with their eyes but with their souls. Helena and Samuel had walked those trails together, and the story of their love became part of the land itself, written not in words but in the enduring truth of two hearts that had found each other and held on tight through everything life could throw at them. It was a good story, the kind worth telling, the kind that mattered. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for. To love truly, to be loved in return, and to leave the world a little better than you found it. They had done all three, and the desert, in its infinite wisdom and infinite memory, would never let that story be forgotten.